years ago, I was running a data center fiber business, and I had a hospital client, and they were breached. They had a ransomware. You're talking about a trauma facility where they're like shifting people out of the, like ambulances are showing up to take them to other hospitals because they were so shut down. And I'm talking to the CIO, and I'm like, we stock spare equipment. Like, this is not in our scope. We will figure it out afterwards. I will send a team to your facility with gear to get you back online. And he's telling me, he's like, oh no, we need to bring in people and do an assessment first and figure it out. I'm like, figure out what? Your firewalls don't work. Your switches are down. Your routers are down. Your servers are down. Everything's down. Like everything, like what are you going to assess? I'm Max Clark. This is Signed. My guest today is Dave Chronister, founder of Parameter Security. And today his firm does, well, a lot of people call pen tests, really vulnerability management and assessments, AKA a company bought a tool, thought they implemented the tool. Is it actually running or not? These are pages of questions I walked into this with thinking I was going to ask. And very quickly, the conversation shifts. And instead of talking about tools and technology and solutions, you're going to hear a discussion about policy, implementation, and risk management. I'm going to get Dave on again in the future. We're going to talk about the other stuff as well. But for right now, let's talk about the actual gaps in security policy and security operations and what this might mean for you. Let's just start at the top, right? Which is, when you walk into a new client for the first time, like before you've started anything and your assessments kicked off, interviews, you're just like there talking to people. What's something that what's the first thing that tells you I'm here to actually do real work, or this is just theater work? Because there's a separation between those two.
Yeah, I would say over the past 10 years, with the C-level becoming a lot younger, or more my age, I should say, or more computer savvy, is the openness about what their actual concerns are, or the understanding of why they're doing it. Typically, if I have a client that says something along the lines of, we had a competitor that got hit with ransomware and we're very concerned about it, or, we have PCI or HIPAA compliant regulation responsibilities, but we're not really sure if we're doing it correctly. That's typically going to be a client that we can help, that's looking for help. We still do every once in a while. Well, my IT guy says that we need to spend more money on security, but I don't know. So we're bringing you in to try to figure it out. Again, with security, the problem is you're preventing. The idea is preventing or to minimize any sort of damage. So you don't necessarily see the fix. We're preventing the issues.
Okay. We're going to go off the rails already. We're on question 2.
All right.
I've been asking this question for 10, 15 years now, which is, how do you sell security to somebody who's not actively buying security? This is a big issue in the industry where it's, SDRs are out campaigning for different security tools, and CISOs are getting pissed off because people are, cold calling them on their cell phones, and companies aren't investing in tooling. But what I've seen as an outsider in that sphere is that you can't educate somebody into purchasing security. You can't tell them all the stats out of the DBIR. You can't share you will have this happen. This is the average cost of an event, and as a result, X% of companies are going to fail within this period of time. That doesn't seem to move the needle at all. So we need, our IT guys said we need to spend money, right? And now we want to find out if we need to spend money. But as you said, it's about preventing an invisible thing from occurring that's not quantified. What actually is moving the needle now for companies to do? Is it just my competitor went out of business because of this, or?
Yeah, it's real easy to say the automatic answer is you just don't sell to someone that doesn't want security. And I would say for a certain group that are not even willing to have the conversation, there's a difference between they don't see the need for it or they don't understand it. And so the ones that don't see the need for it, it's and I started 19 years ago. I was always upset when I run into prospects like that. And eventually you learn they'll figure it out at some point, or they'll go out of business. It's just the way it is. What I've done a lot to help clients or prospects is to really talk about, number one, get rid of cybersecurity. I don't like the term cybersecurity. Are we protecting ourselves from cybers? Are we protecting cyber? I don't know. But we're talking risk, right? And if we're talking data, then we talk about, well, it could be data that's on a piece of paper. It could be wherever. So let's manage risk. And what I found is a lot of C-level understand risk from the financial standpoint. And just having them understand, we're just trying to get your organization to the level of risk you want to be. And by the way, you're the boss. You're going to figure out how you want the business run. We're just looking at it from a technological standpoint or from a risk standpoint. The other thing I've done is I used to do talks called Inside the Mind of a Hacker. It was an hour and a half of, here are all the attacks, including here I'm going to do a phishing attack. Here is a Trojan from the hacker side, where you can see me turn on a webcam, listen to your microphone, watch what you're typing, and understand that the way you're set up right now, you'll never know that that's on your system. Kind of scares people into it. I don't try to do scare tactics, but it's the reality of what's happening.
When you see it, it's hard to unsee, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The other side of it. You touched on it, but it lines up perfectly with where I've been for a while now, which is it's not my job to convince you that you should care about some piece of technology. Like, actually, I don't care if you don't care about some piece of technology. It's like, you have to decide that this is important for you for the business. Like, where are you trying to get to? And it's like, okay, this is how we get there, right? You know, like, you care about your phones, or you don't care about your phones. You care about your network. You don't care about your network. You care about a cloud platform. I mean, I don't care. It's frustrating being on the outside watching, like a train wreck about to happen, and you're like, how do you keep this train wreck from happening? But at the end of the day, it's like it's this is your stuff. Do you care about it, or do you not care about it? And like, I don't think that'll ever leave.
Yeah, and along those lines, this is also why I think we're talking. We're guys from the IT in the '90s, early aughts, and we had the tail wagging the dog then, where it was IT is responsible for everything. And the thing I've really been pushing with my clients, when I was teaching my students, everybody is, as IT, you are not the owner of the data. You are holding it. The board, the management, the corporate owner, they are responsible for it. Mm-hmm. And I think when we start to get that mindset of it is the C-level suite that's responsible for the success of it, there's a little more due care done by them, rather than, well, the IT guy has it. It's always the IT guy, even if it's a female, but the IT guy has it. It's like, number one, you're not giving them money. Number two, you're not telling them what you want to do. You're just kind of throwing it out there. And, regulation has really helped with that, I think, a lot with the C-levels.
Good friend of mine years ago was running global IT for a business, and somebody in the finance team came to him and was basically complaining how expensive they were. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have a team of 5. We cost nothing. I didn't pick this stuff. This is all you. You have X amount of people with laptops and software and all this stuff.
Right.
You're expensive, not me. But he got pushed into this place of really doing what I think everybody should do, which was allocated costing, right? Like, it's not my budget, it's your budget. I'm just facilitating it. I'm making sure it works.
Yeah.
But my org is small. I mean, his point was his org was minuscule compared to the size of the total company. And, but this idea is really funny. So, I guess where I'd go from that is give me an example of a recent engagement where you walked in and, executive that brought you in, the company brought you in, thought that they had a gap. We kind of identified that we think you have a gap, and you start digging into it, and you find it's what you think you have is actually just the tip of the iceberg. And what does that look like typically? Because I mean, what people think they have is usually not what they really have, right?
Right. So we had engagement we'll say company A, uh, 4 years ago. I was familiar with their salesperson just from networking. They had a ransomware engagement, brought us in
Mm-hmm.
to do DFIR. Then we started doing some advisory pen testing, right? So it's two family businesses that merged. The company B, owners of company B were part owners of company A. So talking about like, we were talking earlier about you can't tell someone. So the CIO, who's also one of the owners of company A, says to owner company B, you really need to look at MDR. And they go, now we're good. They get hit with ransomware the next week. So we come in, help them with the final root cause analysis, doing some MDR and doing a risk assessment. As we start going through it, we start to find out they're trying to run two companies in different domains, but they only have one system administrator and one PC tech, and they're letting everybody run local admin, and it just starts to pile up, and it's going to happen. What I have found is people are overwhelmed, right? And I have, up until my recent ADHD diagnosis, dealt with anxiety and catastrophization. So I'm all uber sensitive about this. So instead of going, yeah, it's this, and I think especially some people that sell solutions can sometimes think they're helping, but just cause more anxiety and more just denial. We start to talk about, there's root issues. Let's get you on a framework. Let's start to talk about issues, stuff that we know are problems but are fixable. Let's not make it seem the world's on fire if it doesn't have to be. Hey, maybe you should have one domain for both of your organizations because you just have just the right amount of people, and things like that. Really kid gloves. Because the other thing I've noticed is most CEOs, most management, they want to do right for their company. And this is an area where they don't know what's going on. And as a business owner, I can tell you it's it's scary when people are relying on you and you have areas of weakness in your skill set. So really just trying to empower them to make better decisions, to get up to speed, and to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable has been the best way I've seen to handle that.
Just quick, another segue here. I'm going to try to keep on not go too far off the rails, but you touched on this briefly. Mm-hmm. Let's just use pen testing as an example, mm-hmm. right? You're brought in to do a pen test, which is ultimately you're brought in to give them a report that says, these are the things that we found that you should think about addressing and potential ways for you to address these.
Yeah.
But then it's up to them to actually decide to do something about the pen test mm-hmm. and actually implement it. And my frustration for years was the disconnect between those two things. Like, here's what mm-hmm. you should do and what do they actually do? And it's not my job to actually get these things implemented. It's my job to give you information, educate you. And
yeah.
What do you think, like just off the cuff, percentage of people that actually take a pen test or take these kind of assessments and then actually implement a meaningful change in their organization? Or do you see a lot of people are just like, okay, thanks for the information. We can't focus on that right now because of whatever reason for the business. And, we'll come back to it at some point in the future.
So mine will be a little skewed because I'm dealing with a lot of regulated entities that are required to fix them. But it's probably, for me, it's probably 70-80%. Interestingly enough, it's my larger clients that we have the issue with. We had a Fortune 100. We had a 4-year deal with. And at the end of 4 years, we looked at both the year 1 and year 4 reports, and it was almost the exact same findings. Oh. And their thing is, well, we're a battleship. It's hard for us to move. There's a lot of bureaucratic, whatever. And you just sit there and you go, okay, but you're a big target. But one of the things that we've always tried to do is, people go, well, I want to start with the pen test. I don't know what I have and what I do. And I go, maybe that's not the best place to start.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe we just do a vulnerability assessment and just get you some easy wins, or we'll have the companies come and go, we want to do quarterly pen testing. Have you done pen testing before? No. Well, you're going to have the same results. It's going to look bad. You're spending a lot of money. I'll take it, but there's other things that we can do, and it's really, there's a disconnect sometimes. Pen testing, it's funny. I started this in 2007, and at the time it was called ethical hacking. The reason I knew about it was because I was running a bank. I had to have it done. I went to meet a CIO of a Fortune 500 company here in town. I explained what we did, and he goes, that's a novel concept. I'll let you know if I know anybody that needs it, right? This is 2007. And now I will have people that are running like mom and pop shops, their telephone order, that mail order, they'll go, I think I need a pen test. And so it's the pendulum swung the other side, and it's like, maybe you don't at this point. Maybe we need to look at some other things instead. So
is it just because, I mean, we see insurance companies require pen tests, or like SSL cert, companies that require a pen test annually, or is it just we've entered the lexicon where people are like, oh, I need a pen test because for some reason that's going to like secure my environment or check some box that some other company is going to want from me?
I think so. I think there's a lot of that. I think it's also that's what people have heard before, penetration testing. You see a lot more, again, in non-technical talks. I went through a phase between probably 2014 to 2018. I was doing a lot of media on almost all the national news, CNN, headline news, on every time that there was a hack. And so it was like, it was fun, it was sexy, it was whatever. I was speaking to C-levels. I was doing a lot of that. So the education started to come in. And because people know pen testing is also ethical hacking, it's like, ooh, we're going to get a hacker to do this. And it's like, well, maybe you need to look at your program first and then use it for validation. I think we've done going back to the inside the mind of the hacker, we've done the fun, sexy stuff, but people don't understand that there's actually more foundational work to do. Yeah.
I'm trying not to laugh too much, right? But you're like, are you running, I mean, I love IT marketing because we have to define the terms and redefine them every year. So that way somebody can get some kind of like marketing advantage, right? So two-factor authentication becomes multi-factor authentication, becomes two-step verification, right? It's like, what term do you, but it's like, are you running it? No. Okay. We should start by turning that on. I don't need to pen test you to tell you that you should be running this thing. Right.
Right.
I had a hospital years ago. I was running a data center fiber business, and I had a hospital client, and they were breached. They had a ransomware. I think it was Petra. I think it was Petra. And I mean, you're talking about a trauma facility where they're like shifting people out of the, like ambulances are showing up to take them to other hospitals because they were so shut down. And I was talking to the CFO, the CIO. We got wind of it. We were providing fiber into their buildings. We had no insight into their IT operations. And I'm talking to the CIO, and I'm like, we stock spare equipment. Like, this is not in our scope. We will figure it out afterwards. I will send a team to your facility with gear to get you back online, and he's telling me, he's like, oh no, we need to bring in people and do an assessment first and figure it out. I'm like, figure out what? Your firewalls don't work. Your switches are down. Your routers are down. Your servers are down. Everything's down. Like everything, like what are you going to assess? I mean, unfortunately, this hospital ends up folding not too long afterwards, but you could just see the decision, like train wreck is going on. You're like, what are we focused on here?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when we do IR engagements, it's like, hey, we want to preserve evidence, but there's a certain point of, you have to balance it, and sometimes people just don't get that. And I think some of it's horror stories people have heard about. Well, for example, with the hospitals, OCR, which it comes in and finds them for not doing a root cause analysis or something. It's like, Well, you know, if you had a plan when you went through this, some of the issues, if you did tabletop, especially for your incident response, would have solved a lot of these problems you may run into and may give you more realistic. I had an IR I dealt with, and they were a tech company, and they had, I think it was like 342 racks full of servers in their hot or warm site, I guess, because they had to do a little bit of work. And they're like, we're going to get all these servers up in 6 hours. I go, okay, how many people are you going to do? We're going to have 12 people working on it. Okay, you have 3 KVM switches. How are you going to do that? And it's just things like that the people just don't think about. And again, back to your point of, it sometimes isn't even technology. Sometimes it's management decisions. How long can we be down? No, we're not doing this because it's too risky. And people just, a lot of times, just don't think about that.
I grew up in Los Angeles, so we had to do the when the earthquake hits, like DR plan every year, and it was and it finally it was frustrating for a lot of my career until I finally realized my job was just to give them the plan, and then the board could say we reviewed the plan, we're not doing it. And then then that was like, okay, I've you know, it's like I've done my job, right? But in the process, one of those years, I was talking. There was an big aerospace company. Everybody knows the name, you know, in the LA area. And they had a DR plan, which was they were going to have their key personnel go to a parking lot and get on helicopters and fly. They were going to fly them out of the state to like their other facility, basically, right? Which, I mean, distance-wise, you know, for these heroes, like it would work. And I remember talking to the guy about this, and I was like, so how many of these key people that you've identified have families?
Yeah.
Like, number one. And number two, how are they going to get from wherever they live through the collapsed freeway system to the parking lot where they're supposed to, you know, like take off? And you could see like the look in the eyes of like, oh, nobody's thought of that. I'm like, no, nobody's thought about that. Nobody's leaving their house and their kids and their spouse and be like, sorry, I gotta go to get a helicopter and like book out of town.
Right. Yeah, I had I have two there. So I had a client. It was a small community bank over in the Illinois side, rural community. And, you know, we have tornadoes in the Midwest. So we're always talking tornadoes. And they're like, well, I go, so a tornado hits. What do you do? And they go, well, we close up shop and then we open up over at the VFW. Okay. What are you going to do while the tornado's coming through? Oh, we didn't think about that. How are you going to get this stuff over? Oh, yeah, we didn't think about that. Their idea was, well, we're just going to go over to the VFW and we're good. And it's like, nope, it doesn't work that way. But when I was when my bank I was at before I started Parameter was a small community bank. 40 miles, the headquarters is 40 miles north of St. Louis, 3,000 people in that city, and that was the largest city. We were all over. So interesting thinking that would happen. My boss, who was the owner of all the banks, his name was Donald, I would always tell him, we need to make sure that the disaster recovery has more than just the technology. And he'd be like, you're cussing, you know, that's all it needs, Dave. Don't worry about it. We had a bank called Bank of Louisiana, Missouri up there. And it was one of those, think of like these old towns where downtown, every building's connected to each other.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and his granddaughter was the bank president. And she calls me one morning, she goes, one of the buildings collapsed and they're not letting us into the bank until they are able to inspect every building. And I go, I'll call your grandpa, man. This is not me. And he calls. And I go, I don't know how I didn't get fired for this. I'm like, Donald, the computers are running. What do you want from me? So, you know, it's just things are not thought through. Yeah.
So, you know, how I've been thinking about this one for a long time, where it's like, coming from the world of internet and data centers and
Mhm.
hosting websites and applications, not what we call SaaS, right?
Yeah.
Anybody that went through that era had at some point had a DOS attack,
Mhm.
right? And so then collectively we ended up with enough scar tissue of dealing with DOS attacks. You go out and you get some sort of mitigation system, right? And it just became a cost of doing business on the internet. You had to have a mitigation system in play.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about these things get a lot like backup and recovery and business continuity, disaster recovery planning, and incident response, and security, and they're still siloed in industry speak, but they're all kind of like blurred together in some way.
Yeah.
And how much of this is just collective scar tissue that like people have to go through in order to go, oh, like it's important for us to test our DR, like have a DR plan and then
Yeah.
test it, or have an incident response plan and then test it, or do a tabletop, because the last company I was at, or my neighbor's company that like had this thing, and like unfortunate stat is most of them fail afterwards, right? The companies
Mhm.
go out, go under. But I mean, are we just like counting down the clock in terms of enough scar tissue and collective like bad experiences before people just approach this differently?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it's one of those of companies that don't learn will be out of business. Unfortunately, with some of this stuff, especially with exfiltration of data, PII and PHI especially, we all deal with the damage. Yeah, I think what I have found is organizations that have been hit and have been hit hard get it, and there's an emotional. I mean, when I talk to a lot of the C level with these IRs, I have guys doing the work now, and I'm doing more counseling with them. We will get through this, but let's make sure this doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Strangely enough, time heals all, and people all of a sudden, that client who company B that we were talking about earlier that got hit by the ransomware, and we did the risk assessment, became very apparent they needed a security program, wanted to talk to us about vCISO. And then I was out of town, they were out of town, and now they will not respond because
They've moved on.
Others
Yes.
other moved on. And I think that's real dangerous. Again, it's also the framing from a technical standpoint is, business continuity and disaster recovery is not a technical thing. We're a technical civilization.
Yeah.
But, even when we're at the bank, it's like, okay, does everybody have a flashlight? Does everybody have pen and paper to actually write down transactions while we're down? And I think if we can somehow get it out of the cyber world, and that's, again, this is why I don't like cybersecurity. If we get it out and understand it's business continuity instead, I think it would change a lot more.
So you touched on this briefly, right? How much of this just is that, companies being sold something, a tool,
Mhm.
right? And then of course the tool not doing what they think it's doing. I mean, and then is that like a vendor problem where the vendor is sold something that they just can't do, or a buyer problem because we've got an education or understanding gap, or is integration issue? I mean, I see this all the time where like they buy stuff and they can't get it working. Like,
Yeah.
how does that dynamic play into all this? And what's the cause there?
I always laugh because when I first started the business, I'd talk to CEOs and they would go, well, we have a firewall, so we should be good. And I always want to do like a slow clap,
This show exists because of what we do at itbroker.com. If you're in the middle of a real tech decision right now, new technology, vendor selection, a contract that doesn't feel right, an M&A event that just landed on your lap, and so on, we help buyers like you get it right. Independent strategy, sourcing, and contract negotiation. No kickbacks, no sales quotas, just someone in your corner. Schedule a call at itbroker.com. Back to the episode.
I think it is the fault somewhat of IT. It's residual from back in the .com era of, here, we'll fix it. And then marketing of, well, this will solve your issues. And we know that there is no tool that solves everything. That, you know, I'll ask clients when we do policy what's your patch management policy? Well, we use WSUS or we use whatever other server. And it's like, that's a solution. That's not the policy. When we get into a lot of organizations, we find that they're using a lot of technology they don't necessarily even maybe need to use, especially on the security side, investing so much on one area, not investing on the other area. And, I can feel for them, right? I've been doing this since I was 7 years old. I'm 50, right? I get technology, but a lot of these people don't. And they're being told, well, I buy this, I buy this, I buy this. And it really is something where, again, when I got into this company, I would have told you technology would protect you. I really believe that because that's where I came from.
Yep.
Almost 20 years of pen testing, incident response. I'll tell you, it's the plan. It's, you need to have a blueprint for you to build that house. Your MDR, all that, those are just ants. Those are the tools to build that house. But if you don't have that plan, it's not going to make any sense. And there's going to be unrealistic expectations. So, the line I use with clients is we are risk management. We manage our risk. We do not eliminate risk. It's impossible to eliminate your risk.
Boy, there's a lot to we can go into that with one. Quick anecdote. You're talking about we have a firewall. We're okay. I mean, having to do PCI audits for a long time. It was like we have to have a firewall in between our web server, application server, and our database. And I was like, okay, what's the point? The application server can talk to the database. The firewall is going to allow that traffic. Like if somebody gets on the application server, they have access to the database. Like the username and password connection string is in plain text on the application server. Like, what are we talking about here?
Right.
Okay, so I see this, and I wonder about this a lot too. It's like how much of this is marketing and like marketing lies that have been pushed on people, and then just misconceptions of what things are, like cloud, right? Oh, I've got my data in the cloud; it's safe, and I'm like, delete's a valid operation on your every cloud platform. Like your data is not safe because it's in the cloud; it's not backed up. It's just there, and I think about and I talk a lot with people about defaults. Like any sort of application, computer system, operating system, whatever it is. Defaults are meant to be like really user friendly and like permissive and easy to interact with. And then you start talking about like security policy or like IT policy, and then they feel really restrictive because all of a sudden you're like, you can't do certain things anymore because we've changed the default because the default doesn't make sense. And it's sort of like any sort of sane operation, right? Because we don't want certain things to happen. We don't want you plugging in a USB drive into the computer. We don't. Like that's not a good thing for us. But then people are like, oh, well, you've taken this thing away from me. And it becomes this very like personal, emotional response of like, you've taken something from me. And I'm like, no, we've taken the ability for you to shoot yourself in the foot away from me.
Yeah. There's a lot there. So I think it's the framing that needs to happen. So, I think about cloud. So I would always refer to people, I go, well, we have it in the cloud. That's good, right? I get a lot of that. That's good, right? And it's like, well, it depends. I said, so let's replace that cloud with the term someone else's computer. So I am storing my photos on someone else's computer. Are you okay with that? Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm storing my children's social security numbers on someone else's computer. How do you feel about that? Maybe not so much, and by the way, my first 0 day I ever created was a cloud infrastructure I took over with a browser. So, it's like, but it comes down to a phrase I hear a lot from clients. Well, they wouldn't be selling it if it wasn't secure. And, we kind of touched on it a little bit. I am very, very, pessimistic about AI and a lot of reasons, but a lot of it is they don't talk the risk. Now, I will say, going back to our previous where we were talking about marketing's fault, I will say it's gotten better. I remember having a conversation with antivirus company. The salesperson says, we are able to detect all viruses. I go, well, no, you're not. But anyway, there hasn't been a virus since 1990. You're not able to detect all malware. Well, yes, we are. No, here's a video of me doing it. I am not a developer. I was able to do this with pre-tools, right? And I have seen a lot of the newer companies come in and go, this should be part of a bigger security solution. But then they'll maybe make it seem, then they'll add the marketing phrase pieces to it. And yeah, I think it's good to be pessimistic about it. But again, that doesn't sell product, And I think that's the problem we're running into with non-technical executives. And that even includes, these days, there's still a lot of non-technical CIOs out there.
Because it's a different job. I mean, you get to a certain size, and the job is about managing people and budget, not necessarily managing technology. And that. So I used to have a lot of feelings about that. I have way less feelings about it now because I understand it's like maturity, right? Like I got old enough, I just understand it. I was at a pool party, and one of the guys there had his iCloud account was, quote, hacked. And then he lost access to it. And of course, Apple's like,
no.
What do you? And it's funny because like somebody's talking about this, like, oh, it's so terrible. And it's like, oh, you're the IT guy here. Like, can't you solve this problem? And it's like, I didn't even open my mouth. Like, it's like, in my head, I'm thinking like, you have your password's probably like your child's name plus like a number, and like I feel really bad because in this case he's lost a lot of photos. He's lost his photo albums, and he had some financial loss with it, but not anything massively significant in terms of this guy's like wealth. But it's just like I'm just sitting there. I'm just listening to this conversation. It's just like the education and awareness gap.
Oh yeah,
it's so like I didn't even it's like you want to ask like, oh, did you have Apple like 2-factor authentication turned on? I know not to ask the question because the answer is no, because nobody knows this thing exists.
Right.
It's just like, oh, my account got hacked. It's like, no, your account probably actually didn't get hacked. You probably clicked on something and gave them the password, and then they just took it. I deal with this, with my wife a lot, where, I'm like, what is my responsibility to you in terms of like protecting you on the internet, and at the same time, how do I do that in a way that doesn't create conflict and strife between us, because now I've restricted your ability to do anything on your cell phone. And I'm like,
right.
Like, finding that line is crazy.
Along those lines, what I have found with the operating systems is the, not necessarily misinformation, but the assumptions that are out there. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've heard, Apple was designed for security. And it's like, do you think Windows isn't? Like, or Linux by default is more secure. And it's like, absolutely not. It's pretty wide open. Like Windows 2000, they got their butts handed to them because everything was wide open. And I'd say they've done a fairly decent job, but we'll run into that with clients. I am a big anti-Apple guy for a couple reasons. One, Steve Jobs called and griped about my job when I was in the 90s. So I have a little personal animosity. I always thought that they were very, you couldn't build your own. I mean, everything is that way now, but it's like, sometimes just because you're running Linux, but you've changed mod 777 on everything, doesn't mean it's secure. So let's actually dig a little deeper into this. And, Apple devices will run into that. Okay, you gave everybody Apple devices. What happens when someone quits and doesn't help you transfer that device? Now you don't have ownership of it anymore. It's tied to their iCloud account. Well, and you go, that's just the financial aspect of it. And yeah.
It's I mean, my version of that is every time you see a tech layoff and they're like, oh, we're giving everybody your laptop. And it's like, oh, it sounds really good from a PR standpoint. But the reason why is because it's an absolute nightmare to get all the equipment shipped back to you, to image it, wipe it, and then do something with it. So like when you look at that actual total cost versus the value you recoup, if you're running an MDM, you just go delete,
it'll be done.
And that's it.
But that's assuming they have an MDM, right?
Let's get into that in a minute. Okay, we'll come back to tools here. We talked about a lot of your work being regulated in compliance, right? So you've got industries that were already regulated and in compliance, and then you've got customers and companies that are either being pushed into compliance for the first time, or they're they're downstream and it's a supply chain requirement for them because they want to do business with a company.
Right.
And so now let's take this in two parts. Like the first part is they show up and they say, I have to be SOC 2, I have to be PCI, I have to be CMMC, I have to be HIPAA, compliant. What percentage of people going through that process actually end up in any sort of real security when they're done with it? And we can get into the specific compliances, I like to rail on SOC 2 a lot, but
you and me both, but I'm not a CPA. I can't run one, but we're doing taxes at parameter security. I think we will a lot of times, especially the older regulations, HIPAA, GLBA, things like that, people got dinged hard. And so it's like, we know that we are not doing it correctly. So what can we do to help? What can we do? It's almost all policy. It is almost all policy. They just have technology out there. They kind of maybe have it in their head, but what their policies are, but it's not out there. It's not formalized. PCI is where we get a lot of brand new clients, and we're about right. We won't be dealing with CMMC that way because we're going to be C3PAO, so we'll just audit and get rid of the advisory on that. But I would say for a lot of the regulated companies, they get there. Now, what we push, though, is it's a security program and you are maturing. So what I tell people is regulations, the least you need to do to not go to jail, right? There's a little bit more to it. And by the way, there's more to it than just your regulation, because you start to talk to board and you go, how do you feel? Well, it says we should do this, but I kind of want to do it a little bit more secure. Perfect. That's the way you should do it. We also get a lot more clients these days. I'd say past 7-8 years that are just wanting to do the right thing. Yeah, you get vendor due diligence kicking in, but more than anything, we're getting really worried about this. Now we're having to pay co-insurance on cyber liability. We're getting all these people. And for them, it's quick wins, but keeping the distance, going the distance, I would say there's a lot more failure rate there. They hit that point where they feel comfortable and then they just kind of let it go,
How do we get to the point where people look at SOC 2 as a security compliance framework?
What was the one before it? The GA70. It's because CPAs are talking to the CEOs, and it's it floors me. It's not even a security. It will tell you if you have a fence and you open it and close it every day. Then we'll tell you if there's a big old hole in it. It's a process. It's about. We had to get SOC 2 compliant for our pen test last year, and that really bothered me, to be honest. And
this is because clients were demanding it from you. Are you SOC 2?
We had a large client demanded it.
Yeah, but this is the thing that's crazy is like all of a sudden people have decided like you have to have SOC 2 in order to do business because that's our checkbox we want to check, and then it feels like there's no thought process behind it of like in terms of like what does this actually mean? It's like you're SOC 2. But you picked all the controls that you chose in order to be SOC 2. And I'm looking, and then you have a company going, oh, they're SOC 2, they're fine. You're like, what are the controls that they're adhering to?
At least max 3 times a week, I am on sales calls through the channel with someone that goes, we need you to do SOC 2. I'm not a CPA. Well, what does that have to do with it? a CPA is running the security, and maybe 30% of the time someone goes, oh. Other times it just goes over their head. And it's just like, what, I get it. There's some people who do SOC 2 great, but I think there has been, for my industry, for the cybersecurity industry, a major issue with that we really just haven't marketed why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep preaching the word on the SOC 2, but it's tough to do. It's
at this
tough
point,
to
it's
do.
kind of taken on. It's its own animal,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Because to your point, now what people say is, well, I get it, but that's what they want.
So, I mean, are we, is there any hope of like a saner framework or compliance? I mean, CMMC, will CMMC replace SOC 2, like outside of defense and manufacturing, and become like a saner framework for people to adhere to?
I think if you want to be certified ISO 27001, which is a cybersecurity framework, you're actually building, are you on framework? Or you can't get certified for NIST CSF, but you can do readiness assessments on it.
Well, that's why I tell everybody before they start even thinking about SOC 2. It's like, go do a NIST CSF or NIST 700 or whatever, and like pick one, because that'll give you at least alignment. Like, you have goals.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, almost every regulation's built off of NIST, the 800, the granddaddy one. But it's like, you're to your point of SOC, we'll do some readiness assessments, and to be honest, it's kind of one of my least favorite, because we can look at certain controls and then they go and do something completely different. Mm-hmm. And they go, well, why didn't we pass? Well, this isn't what you selected when you met with us.
How do we, so, I mean, is the cat out of the bag with this thing, or is there any way to like fix this, right? And what I mean by that is like HIPAA. Okay, I'll take my two biggest ones that I have the most beef with when I'm trying to actually explain this, right? On the one side, it's HIPAA, because now they've decided, people know they have to go out and get a BAA from all their vendors. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, you've got to sign BAA from whatever piece of technology infrastructure you're running, but have you read what the BAA actually says? And everybody's like, no. Mm-hmm. Like, we have the BAA, we're okay. And the second one's SOC 2. And I'm like, okay, so you have to get SOC 2 compliant because your customer's demanding it, or you only want to do business with companies that have a SOC 2 stamp because then you think that they're secure. But what does that mean for you, right? Like how? So, I mean, sometimes I feel like the crazy person. Like, do I want to actually explain what the BAA is that they have received from fill in the blank infrastructure company means absolutely nothing to them? Or, because a lot of them say, my favorite phrasing, what's the paraphrase in the BAA? Our system could possibly be secure as long as you configure it correctly, and it's completely up to you in order to actually configure it correctly for it to be secure, and we have no liability to you whatsoever in use, right?
Yeah, it's security theater, or we call it blinky light security. You see something blinking, you go, okay, we're secure. But I think we have to reframe that to understand this is human nature, right? We're both old enough to remember. I'm 50, so it's maybe a little older, but having to do an atomic bomb drill and getting under my desk. This piece of wood is going to protect me, and there's a lot of security theater that's been around for thousands of years. I think the problem we have is a lot of people go, I'm just not good at technology, and they turn their brains off. Or, well, if everybody else is doing it, I'll be a joiner on that. And that's the problem with AI right now. No one's thinking about the risk, and everybody's just doing it. And unfortunately, I don't see an end to it. I think companies are wising up. I think that's where, unfortunately, like you had said earlier, is we just have, you get to the point of, if you're not doing it, I just want to make sure you don't have my data or the data of anybody I love, and be done with it. And you're going to hit yourself out of existence, and it can be frustrating. A lot. Again, I've been doing it long enough now where I'll have some of my younger employees get upset, and I'm like, you can't save them all, and we have lots of good clients that really do want help. Focus your attention on them.
For somebody that's going or starting through the, let's say, called SOC 2 process,
Mm-hmm.
how do you help them get more out of it than just a lot of annual work? Yeah, like actually meaningfully use SOC 2 to like improve the business, as opposed to like, oh, every year we have to go through this audit again, and now we've got one or two people designated just to go out and collect evidence, and we have to go buy this tool in order to have the evidence, in order to do that. But how do we actually make this like a meaningful exercise for people?
Man, SOC 2, that's hard. No, I think with any of them, any of these, it's good that it's not ad hoc, right? And to actually go, listen, if you're going to do this for SOC 2, worry about everything. Let's just go ahead and have one holistic security program to look at everything. So that way you're not going, well, for SOC 2, we're doing this. The SOC 2 areas, we're doing this. For us, we're doing this. It's not efficient. It's not effective. And making sure that they have processes and policies that are not only secure, but make sense to them and aren't overly burdensome. Mm-hmm. And you can run into this a lot with, change management or patch management, for example. And it's like, okay, well, how are you doing this? You don't have to do it the same way a Microsoft is doing their corporate, but this may be a good point for you to start to look at what applications do you actually have on your systems, and go through those processes that way. The problem with the SOC 2 is it usually targets a particular product or service. And so a lot of people will compartmentalize it. And it's like, okay, well, you have this part under control, but the rest of your company is an absolute security nightmare. What happens when you can't turn the lights on to do that service? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that always kind of is frustrating for me.
I get these requests usually, and it starts with tools, right? Because there's some checkbox that they have to go out and get, right? So, and we see a lot of cyber insurance renewals, or now where it's like what SAT, SEG, EDR, MDR. There's like some acronym on the form. It's like, do you have this? Yes or no? Like, oh, I can't insure you if you don't have it. And And that's creating an interesting dynamic as well, where it's like, okay, now I just need to go out and get some sort of SAT tool and like implement it to say that I have it in order to check some box. And I always feel tension between like, do we try to pump the brakes here a little bit and talk about what we're actually trying to achieve with this thing, and how do we implement something that actually does something meaningful for you? Or am I just helping you check the box so you can move on with your day?
Yeah. It's that's the point. Like, it makes sense to make sure people are not only having a security program by actually enforcing it, but going back to like the cybersecurity or the cyber liability insurance worksheets, it's almost like they created it knowing a non-technical person is going to be the ones not only filling it out but reviewing it. So compensating controls are huge, mm-hmm. right? And we look at risk, and there's three things you can do with risk. You can address it, you can accept it, or you can transfer it, which means buying insurance. All of those are valid. But they take that out and say you need to have a tool. And it's like, I don't necessarily need that. PCI, when we're QSAs, we became PCI certified in 2014. Even back then, the regulation said tripwire. You had to use tripwire for integrity verifier. It's like, why? I don't have anything that requires that, mm-hmm. And yeah, tools are just tool. I like the term tool, and I like that you're using the term tool. Tools help you accomplish something.
Yeah.
Solutions is the word I don't like, because a solution means your problem's gone. And in many cases, you may have reduced it to an acceptable risk, but it's not really gone.
I read a stat an insurance company released, and it was talking about ransomware, and based on org size, and on the very low end of SMBs, it was the average ransomware attack at $500,000 loss. It was like $480,000 or something. But the next piece of it was fascinating, which was the percentage of ransomware encryption events that took place with a leading EDR in place, right? Leading EDR, and the second part of that, and was high, 60+% leading EDR in place, ransomware encrypted, and the only firms that survived an encryption event were ones that had outsourced MDR in place that then saw and reacted fast enough. And it was interesting that I saw that this was published to me, because I've been talking about this for a long time now, where it's like, what's your actual goal of your cybersecurity? You talk about prevention. I've seen a lot of people that try to equate this to like you're buying an insurance policy, and I'm like, it's not insurance. Insurance pays you after your house burns down, right? This is something different. And then it's like, well, what's the ROI on this tool? And it's like, I can't really quantify it. Like, your business stays in business or goes out of business, but I can't really tell you. It's like, how do you fit that gap? And now I just really try to explain to people, like, it really feels like your only goal here, well, two goals, right? You're trying to prevent like really easily avoidable things from happening to you. And then you're just trying to catch it as quickly as you possibly can, because dwell time's gone from 200 days to like hours, right? How fast can you catch it and just like fight it? It's like a very different approach now, right?
Well, and I would run into this years ago with WAFs for web application. It's like, it was a Fortune 100. I went into speak at an event. I think it was ISACA event or something. And I was going through the ways to get through attacks. And again, I will tell you, I'm not a developer. I taught CEH, I taught CISSP for so many years. I can tell you the fundamental attacks. Code, maybe I can read it, but so I'm explaining the concepts. And someone goes, "Oh, we just have a WAF. We're good." And it's like, that's putting a Band-Aid on a gaping, hemorrhaging wound. It's like, we need to solve some of the issues first and not just have security theater again. Well, we have this, I have to laugh with the MDR. It's kind of tragic. We had a client, they were in healthcare. They would contact us every other year to do a policy assessment. No pen test, nothing. I had a client, a gentleman who used to work for one of my old clients, reach out to me. He ended up being, had just become the CSO for the parent company. My client got hit with a ransomware attack. They had MDR, and it was in monitored mode for years. And they're still trying to figure out why. Well, they got rid of everybody. That was almost a year ago, and they're still preparing for OCR to come in. I mean, and we are still talking to their attorneys, right? It's and you sit there and you go, well, you should just throw that money away.
Well, this is okay. So we I think for the average person, the experience becomes like, this organization got breached. We all get free credit monitoring, right? And like, that's how they associate like costs with these things. But then you're like, attorneys are very expensive. And if you're prepping for some sort of like fight, like whatever it is, and you're talking to attorneys, like that's a real cost that builds very quickly for a company in terms of like, like, and it's, I don't care. I don't want to go. I want to talk about AI. I don't want to talk about this just yet.
Okay.
Okay. So probably the biggest misconception I have to deal with daily is we don't have something a hacker wants. And it's like, no, you have money, right? Like, you have everything. The only thing the hacker wants from you is money. It's in your bank account. It's in your resources. You'll pay to get your business back online, right? So yes, you have something.
Well, I would say also, you have a platform I can now run other attacks on to other companies where the FBI comes to you and not me.
Right. Okay. That's a good point. Um, then it's like, I'm not a target. And it's like, well, are you connected to the internet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're a target. So, I mean, I deal with those two a lot. But AI is interesting because we have AI being used to launch attacks. We have AI being used. I mean, AI, what is AI? Nobody really knows what AI is anymore, right?
Yeah.
We have AI being used to defend against attacks. And then we have AI being deployed inside of the organization, which then creates its own risk profile.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to start?
What is AI? 99% of it's what we call agent washing or AI washing. It's not, I mean, AI is not even AI, right? It's
Right.
LLMs, it's if then statements, but we looked at one of those AI pen testing platforms one time, just tested it out, and they're running Metasploit. There's no AI, there's no LLMs in it. So 99% of what people are dealing with that's AI is not AI. My talk this year, I have two talks. One is the hidden, it's actually, I had for a while, not so hidden risk of AI in your organization. And the other is the rise of AI in social engineering. And in the organization one, I'm very pessimistic. This is not something you should use. And then social engineering, I'm like, this thing's amazing to use. What's the disconnect?
Mm-hmm.
I'm an attacker. I'm burning bridges as I come through. If I try to hit 50,000 people and it fails 30,000 times, it doesn't matter. I just move on. So AI is great because AI is not reliable. On the corporate side, one single mistake can cause you thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. And by the way, I think people are going to find that's more expensive and with hallucination rates outrageously high, causing a lot of issues there. And there's a lot of legal issues we've already talked about. So, yeah,
I mean, you're talking about this. This is interesting, okay? Because that the tailing part of that segment, to cut you off, statement is um, okay. I can express this a little bit differently, which is if you have two employees ask the same question to your AI tool and they both and they get different answers, which is very common. What does that introduce in terms of risk to the organization, right? This is not a cybersecurity thing. This is just like AI risk and how you're deploying AI for your enterprise.
Well, there was actually a study that came out that said that experienced developers using AI were less efficient because they actually had to come through and validate and sometimes fix it. A friend of mine, Dave Kennedy, who runs Trusted Sec, he's a big AI dude, and Forbes just did an article on him. He's pulling Anthropic because, in his estimation, the newer models are about 75% inaccurate and creating vulnerabilities. I mean, the amount. I started going through this because I'm a business owner. I'm a small business owner. And there's this group of business owners called EO, Entrepreneur Organization. It's almost like a cult. Yep. My building that I actually have my office in, all my employees are remote. They're all EO members, 150 of us. And AI this, AI that, AI this. And it's like, where are your issues? What do you not see the issues? And so I started going through this to educate them and my clients, and from legal ramifications to mistakes to there is many studies. Mellon University did one that showed 95% of all AI initiatives did not make it to production, and the 5% that did showed little or no ROI. And this is for large Fortune 500 companies. And you sit there and you start to go, what are we doing? Why are we pushing this? And kind of going back to when you were talking earlier about people not worried about the threats. It's like, well, it's that FOMO, right? It's, well, everybody else is doing it. I had a conversation with someone that said, well, Oracle just laid off 30,000 people because of AI efficiencies. It's like, they laid off 30,000 people to pay for a deal that they made with OpenAI. Meta's laying off 8,000 people to pay for it. They're not seeing efficiencies. they're hoping their whole company's on it.
Well, and the other dirty secret is every company has a certain percentage of headcount that they keep around because when they need to, they can lay them. I mean, layoffs are a fast trigger for a business. Like you can't get out of contracts with vendors. You can lay people off. It's a very fast thing. Oh, we need some positive news for the stock market. Let's lay off 10%. We'll get a stock because we don't have anything else to report. I'm very cynical about this at this point, but and there's a wave of AI related layoffs, and you dig into it a little bit and you're like, this has nothing to do with AI. You're just using AI as the cover to then try to get the stock bump because you're laid off 10%.
It was COVID 6 years ago, right? It was, well, this is it. Well, because of this, we have to lay people off. And it's like, there's no empirical evidence that it's actually working for an enterprise. Now, something like a chat GPT for a particular person, like I mentioned, I was just recently ADHD diagnosed. Starting on a blank piece of paper is horrible. And before I got treated for this, I would try to use it at the beginning and just to fill the page. But, I quickly found it does not very eloquent in the way it speaks. It's incorrect a lot. And this is someone that understands it. Understands the industry. And now you have vibe coding. You have people that are just like, I can do this stuff. To give you, when I joined this where my office is, they gave me the a contract, and the dude's a big AI guy. And I'm like, dude, your contract says that if I quit paying, you can't kick me out. He's like, that's weird. I'm like, did you do this in AI? Well, yeah, it's amazing. It's like, I'm not even a contracts attorney. There's 10 issues here and you didn't even read it. That's the problem.
I had this with my team internally. And by the way, I've tried to explain this to a bunch of different people, but I'll share my take on this with you. You look through the iterations of tech and tech adoption, right? And we get to social media and really understanding growth in social media and this reward dopamine system that comes back out of social media platforms. Well, tech platforms and companies understand this pattern of dopamine, and then they've just applied it into AI, these chat tools because, well, they need adoption, they need DAUs, they need usage growth, right?
Yeah.
And so, the platform will manipulate you to keep your engagement high by design. And I noticed cases where, same thing. SMB is funny. I love the term SMB because, according to, it's 1,000 people is still an SMB.
Right.
So we have a small company, we have an SMB, but I noticed people on my team just completely outsourcing their brain to it. I'm like, you're here because you have a brain. Like if you stop using your brain, like, what are we doing? What are you talking about?
Yeah. That's where we're at with it. Well, quick interesting fact, OpenAI did a study that actually showed that their platform and other platforms will come across more confident the more inaccurate it is.
Oh, 100%. I had an example with this one. I fly as a hobby, and so we have the FAR aim, right, which is the aeronautic, like the standard, and basically a really big rule book that gets published by the FAA every year. Okay.
Right.
And I was looking up something very esoteric, that there's an acronym, there's a mnemonic for it. I'm like, okay, I don't remember the acronym. And there was some specific edge case I was looking up, and I was asking an AI tool. I was like, what is the situation here and how does this apply? And the response it gave to me, I know it's incorrect. I'm looking for the actual specific reasons why, I have to do one thing versus another thing. And it's completely wrong. And I reply back to it, and my response is something like, that's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, you're right, it's not accurate. It gives me another answer, completely wrong. And I'm like, what are we
and I don't know about you. I feel like I'm in loony world when I start to bring this stuff up and people just look at me like I have 5 heads,
Yeah.
So along those lines, the way we're doing our business, so NIST just released, for anybody that's interested, the AI risk management framework and its guidance. And we're about ready to release it in a couple of weeks, our AI risk assessment. But along those lines, I had to create our policy, and I do not allow And again, I say I'm the 100% owner in it, so I'm kind of the benevolent dictator there. Do not allow any AI in any of our or AI technologies in any of our billable work. Basically, sales and marketing, but it can only be used as a part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only accuracy, but it's also people are paying us for our experience. And AI doesn't have our experience. If then statements do not have our experience, and if we're wrong, that can be detrimental to one of our clients. And so, where do I see the future? It's like anything. We've been around this again. We had it with cloud, we had it with SaaS products, with whatever virtualization. Mm-hmm. There will be specific needs for this, but it is not the game changer in the way people think it's going to be. I think it will collapse the industry because, especially that Oracle OpenAI deal where Oracle has laying off 30,000 people. They have taken their loans to the max. Their APR and their loans have tripled to do this OpenAI deal where it's $700 billion over the next 10 years. OpenAI is making $9 billion a year and has $130 billion in the bank. It's going to collapse everything, So
I was reading the bear case for building gigawatt data centers, and it's like we're gonna spend $50 billion to build a data center. It's going to return this, and the forecast is like it's going to make this much money per year, and it's going to be a two-year payoff. And again, it's like I feel like the crazy person sometimes with these things because you're like, the problem with tech is you cannot create a financial model using assumptions,
right,
in any of these systems, because what does it take to break the assumption? Oh, how much resources do we need to train a model? If you DeepSeek threw that completely out the window, and you're like, oh, we don't need the same amount of compute because we can just run the process slightly different. And you're like, okay, well, how does that impact your like $50 billion single data center, build?
Right.
And so, from you talk about like risk management and risk assessments for AI. How much of this is going to push into what we talk about classically is cybersecurity, or is this more like GRC at this point? And is GRC a cybersecurity function, or is it something different? And the C-suite as it's being pushed on by their board and shareholders of like, how are you guys going to move faster with AI? Mm-hmm. Everybody needed a digital transformation strategy. Now everybody needs an AI strategy, right?
Yeah.
Is there, what's the best case scenario outcome for us in risk management around AI? Not in terms of like the offensive and defensive standpoint, but just AI in terms of risk profiles inside of companies.
If it follows any other trend, there's going to be some very bloody incidents that will happen, mm-hmm. that will then cause people to wake up, maybe the government to come in and go, we need to regulate this. Yeah, I will say before I tear apart AI, I want it to work. Again, I would love computers since I was a little kid. Like, I have an Agent Zero running on my data center in my house. I have a data center in my house. Okay, I have a full 42U rack. I have local LLMs running on systems. I want it to work. I keep trying, and it's just not working. I think from the macro level, there'll be some massive issues that will happen. And, especially with everybody just going to these general LLMs, the ChatGPT, stuff like that. On a micro level, it'll be businesses starting to realize they're going to have incidents. No one's going to see, especially in the SMB realm, that they're not saving any money because they don't know what they started with. No one's doing a formalized approach to it other than Fortune 500. And by the way, my Fortune 500 clients are the ones going, no AI on our stuff. And it's like, you're right. Good. We don't have it because they get it.
Why is it that as we become older and older tech guys, and again, guys, because, company, there's like, it's like this really funny, like pessimistic attitude of like I'm a tech ops, I'm a technology optimist, maximalist, acceleration dude. Like I 100% in the core of my being believe that technology improves the human condition, and the more technology that we get, the better off the human condition is, and these are all good positive things for society, right? Like I am absolutely that guy. But then there's like the other side of it, which is just the reality of deploying any sort of technology advancement and
Mm-hmm.
like, so, and like dealing with people deploying technology and managing it, and you're like, oh, yeah.
The new hotness is the old hotness,
Oh,
right?
geez.
And
Yeah.
what's the word I'm thinking about? It's Dunning Kruger,
Yes.
Dunning Kruger.
Yes.
And we may not know this technology, but we know what we don't know. We know we don't know stuff, and I think it's probably you and I spending many nights and weekends away from our friends and families fixing stupid stuff. But you know, I always get in trouble because people go, "I'm a tech person." I'm like, "Yeah, not really." But true tech people, I don't see anybody excited or going, "This is amazing." A lot of people are more like we are, like, "Man, I'd love for this to work. It's just not working," but they're pushing it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the pseudo tech people, like, "I'm a power user and this is great and I can do this. Who needs this?"
I'm running
It,
Claudebot on my desktop and I
oh,
gave it access to my bank
oh,
account, and you're just like,
so
oh, I know how this story's gonna play out.
so that and this is the part where I sit here and it affected me. So I mentioned my landlord. He's a YPO member. He had this space, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you? Can you manage our network? I'll cut rent." I'm like, "Yeah, perfect, no problem. Been doing it forever." And he came down one day. He goes, "I'm running Claudebot. This is great." I'm like, here's a national radio show I was on over the weekend talking about how horrible this is. You shouldn't do it." And he's like, "I know it's great, right?" And it's like, well, crap. Like, you just put all of us in danger, including me. Okay, segmenting myself off on the network, and how do you handle that? Even when I've tried to talk to him afterwards, he's just like, "No, it's fine, it's fine." Looking at his life and his risk in his life, I go, I get it now. But I think a lot of people are seeing dollars, a lot of people are seeing this, and they are avoiding the risk. It's not that they are not looking at, they are 100% avoiding it, and it's going to be dangerous. Hopefully it happens quickly before it's too ingrained,
Mhm.
you know.
It's I want to ask you some tools questions
Sure.
before we wrap up here, and actually not specifically in tools, but let's say trends. There's always a push by tech marketing to try to invent new categories.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can invent some new category that then gets an analyst coverage, you're the first one in the market, you get some, tailwinds effects in your, so like,
Right.
we go to EDR to MDR to XDR to like super DR, like these things keep mutating on us. And then the second thing is this push between, and what I'm really curious about, right, from your take, is this friction between, let's call it like, best in class solution versus bundling and
Mm-hmm.
full stack, right? Microsoft is pushing E5 security. It's a full stack. It's it's a very efficient bundle. Now, you look at the cost of deploying E5 security with their EDR and their SEG versus, other EDRs and SEGs, the cost per user, cost per seat normalizes very fast. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost always like dead on. Like, do you want to run this tool or that tool? It's going to, there's efficiencies obviously if you're managing one admin console. But then I look at it and I'm like, okay, great. So now you've invested your entire cybersecurity program into a single vendor stack. And is that now a bad thing? Because you have no check and balance going on. How do you cancel people on this idea between, you're going to buy all these tools and you acquire all of them from one OEM because the one OEM is now either built or acquired all the stack to sell it to you as like this single point solution, versus, hey, we're going to use a different brand for this and a different brand for this. And they do talk to each other, but
Right.
you're managing
Yeah.
different tools.
You know, this always starts with the risk assessment, whether it's a formal paper or it's not, and I run into that too, right? We're running 365 in the office. We're less than 10 people, right? I guess we're with part-timers now 15, but and we're running whatever is above E5. It's the new one.
E7.
E7, yeah. And former MCSE, I don't even know Microsoft.
I deal with this
licensing
a lot.
anyway. Yeah,
no,
right.
Yeah, I deal. Yeah. I know it because I was just in the PowerPoint presentation trying to help somebody through what license tier do we get whatever thing from, and you're like, it's a 35-page document, right? Like, let's go figure this out now.
Yeah, but then we're running SIM. Why are we not running MDR? Because the SIM solution we have has a SOC. I personally know the person who designed it, and we tested it. And, I think it comes down to something's better than nothing, and we mature it. So a company that has nothing, I'm going to start them with just get this bundled, because they don't understand the risk. When you're maturing, you're not only maturing your program, you're maturing your people that are part of the program. That includes your C-suite. And then, this is the big no-no that I have is the person that sells you the control is not the person that validates the control, right? And we struggle with this because we'll write policy, but then we're not the ones that are going to audit it. And this is why we don't sell solutions, really. But other than that, it's just going through it and saying, let's just start with this, because it can get very expensive very quick. And this is also where we have to truly understand your risk to understand what to pay for, because maybe Microsoft Defender is just good enough because you have MDR, and let's face it, antivirus is worthless these days. The one I'll get is, well, should I have DLP? I don't know. Because I get asked this stuff all the time. I don't know. I don't know your situation.
Do you know what DLP is and how it works?
Right. And maybe you do, but I'm not the one that should be asking you. I should advise you. I can advise you on issues I've seen with it. I'm not going to give you a company to go for, but it's questions like that you go, let's just start with something. Let's get you to a level, and then let's start to mature you. And I have seen clients that will start with something that's good for now, but once they understand the limitations, so I hate to pick on them, but Qualys. Qualys is better than nothing. I'm not a huge Qualys fan. I like Tenable.
So you're talking about the CSPM product specifically?
Well, yeah, I call them vulnerability scanners. Yeah. But it's like Qualys is great. It's gets you to where you are, but here's some limitations for what it does. And once they start to understand those limitations, then they can move to something a little more mature. So
the thing that Qualys, I'm in a similar boat, right? Where and the other thing I like about Qualys is it's very inexpensive to get into something that'll actually inspect your cloud platform and then align it with NIST CFS and kind of give you a, and the things that it's like really basic stuff that people don't even realize happen. It's like, oh, we made some policy change, and like our S3 buckets are now this, or we did this and we didn't realize it. It's like so much change is happening so fast. You're like, do you have anything that's actually looking and tracking this and just giving? And I've seen, Tenable's been through some stuff too, where it's like, as they pushed into Tenable 1, I had a client that had aligned a lot of SOC 2 controls over a previous version of Tenable, and then they upgraded to the new version of Tenable, and then their controls, like the tool changed. So they no longer had, the ability to like run their, and you're like, okay, that's a fun, bizarro problem that we have to deal with now.
Right. Well, and that can come down to where people's tools are their security program.
Yes. In most cases, I think that that's the truth. Right.
And then they go, well, we have to change how we're doing things because of the program. It's like, no, that's the wrong way of doing it.
This is an issue. I mean, you brought this up at the beginning, where it's like, what's your policy and are you adhering to your policy? Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, how many organizations are actually writing their own policies versus just trying to copy, a policy because they they have to have a policy. It's like,
Yeah.
we've been told that we have to have a policy, so let's go out and copy, a SANS policy. But
Mhm.
now is that policy actually deployed, and implemented, and managed inside the
Mhm.
company, or is it like we have this policy on the shelf, so to speak, that we can then point to and say we have this policy?
Yeah. Let me give you I'm going to give you a quick anecdote. Now I'll give you a quick lesson on policy and
Yeah.
why it's so powerful. So I did that when I was at the bank. Really, I understood security from a system administrator standpoint. And I'll be honest, when I started this company, I look back and I was very naive on security, right? But we had 6 bank charters all going through GLBA. So we had regulators in every 6 months. And I looked at our policy. Our policy still said microcomputers. And this is in 2002. 2002. So I got the best policy money could buy. And I remember as a Federal Reserve auditor, his name Carl Cooney. He is what made me realize it's not so bad to be an auditor. And he looked at it and he goes, Dave, this is a great policy. This is awesome, man. Are you doing it? And I'm like, I was like 25, I was a young guy. And he goes, this is all you need to realize. If you say you're doing it, do it. And if you're doing it, say you're doing it. And, policy has gotten as weird. It's become almost biblical, the way people look at it. And, we use the term policy, but policy to encapsulate everything, but policy is your management statements. So a wireless policy should be something along the lines of, in order to provide mobile computers access in our organization, we'll use Wi-Fi capabilities that include accountability for connection as well as strong encryption methods, right? That policy will be relevant today, tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then where people start to get lost is the standard. The standard is we're going to use WPA2 with radius server, connected AD, whatever. And then you have your procedure, your SOP of here is how we set up that user. Here's how we configure the WAP. And when we start to work with policy, it's very daunting to a lot of C-level. And when we start to talk to them about it, they get it at that point because they realize I don't have to deal with technology. I don't have to deal with this is my part. Mm-hmm. And then my custodians, the IT people who I said are not responsible for it, they put it in the technical realm. So because people don't understand that, they will copy policy and then make sure not implementing it or making it relevant to their situation. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to try to formulate a really good follow-up to this one. There are, we talked about beforehand. We talked about two-factor authentication briefly, mm-hmm. right? And I still see a lot of tension between like, I'm my user, insider threat, right? Mm-hmm. Intentional malicious act, accidental act, whatever it is, right? But like, there's still tension between, and I try to explain to people like, your employees, you have to protect them because you've got professional threat actors at this point that are going to take advantage of them. And it's not mm-hmm. like this thing that you have to, just how we relate to it is different. But then we start talking about tools. Again, going back to tools, right? Policies are like, the thing I do like about SOC 2 is it forces people to actually invest and think about certain things of like, how do we actually track, right? Mm-hmm. The audit standpoint of it of, we need to be able to actually audit where people are logging in from to our network. And then you look at a tool and you're like, this tool gives me no capability to do that. We need a different tool. And then you get into better stuff like, pulling out VPN and investing in some sort of ZTNA, right? Like mm-hmm. it's, and we can argue, we can talk about what's real ZTNA versus not and what's a real SDP versus not. But like just the ability to be able to say we can connect, to an IDP and then actually audit that access, and you think, and it sounds so crazy, but it's like, that is like a light year difference in terms of security posture and capability for that company when it really
Yeah.
gets implemented. You talk about it, but so then you have the same thing where it's like that trigger was because the company decided that SOC 2 was important to them. And then in order to get to SOC 2, they had to do something, and that forces this change. And you see a lot of other tools that are really single sign on, two-factor authentication. We can argue about passkeys. Are they good or are they bad? Versus hardware tokens.
Mm-hmm.
You give somebody a YubiKey, and then you say like, oh, try to go phish them with that YubiKey. It's, is it possible?
Yeah.
Relatively inexpensive device to deploy inside an organization that eradicates a huge threat factor without even blinking. But now you have to have like top level policy decision change that then gets enforced and pushed down on people, and people will push back on like, oh, this is a drag. I don't want to have to carry this thing around on my keychain.
Right. Gets lost and the person doesn't notice it right away,
Right. Like, so how do we help people help themselves with this stuff?
I think organizations like yours are very helpful, where it's more of a trusted person that is able to look at different solutions and be that opinion, expert opinion. Because again, I can come in and say this is an issue, and I can help them understand the risk. But then when you start to get into the weeds, it becomes an issue. The other thing is again, we don't deal with this a lot because of the cost of our services. But if we have someone that doesn't have a technology provider, like, why are you doing that? I have a fractional CFO because I know I'm not good with numbers, right? Computers only count to one. I can't count any higher than that. So being able to start to work through that. This is also where I like the cybersecurity side. I'll say the security cycle of identify risk, determine controls, implement or manage risk, implement and validate. And then one comes back to manage evolving risk, right? And one of the issues I've seen even back in my IT days is we don't know what a win looks like. We don't know what the solve looks like. We just go, well, this will fix our issues. Well, what are our issues? I don't know. Well, will we know when it's fixed? I guess we implemented it. And so it's a guess. And like you said, any data, someone even just having a notebook, just writing something down, any sort of data is better than nothing. And we do this with financials, but for some reason in IT, we just go, no, we're good. They wouldn't have done it if it wasn't effective or secure anyway. Yeah. It's a tough problem. I don't see it changing much, again, because people have gotten more technologically savvy. I mean, when I first started in the 90s, I had people they would have their admins print out their emails, write, type it in. We're not at that level yet, but we're still dealing with I'm going to call it the HIPAA problem in small, medium-sized businesses. CEOs and C-level going, I'm too busy to worry about that. And with HIPAA, they made it criminal fines to doctors too busy, but I don't know what we're going to do with small businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's wrap this with a question here, which is,
sure.
Let's ignore like the why they came to you or how they came to you. What is one question when you wish people knew to ask you when they started down this process, right? So we can assume it's driven by an assessment, right? But what's something that people are not asking that they should?
Yeah, 1,000 things come to mind.
I mean, a lot, right? But like, if you had to pick one.
I think it would probably have to do with what is my responsibility in this. Again, I'm dealing with a lot of, and I'm picking on my smaller, less mature organizations. What is my responsibility? Because, like you said, and we've talked about this entire interview, a a lot of people are tool centric.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't truly understand what their responsibilities are, um, and what they're required to do in their position. They outsource it to IT, or they think well, we have a vendor doing it. It's not our issue. So, if on the C level, what is our responsibility? I think for the tech people is, what's a better way to document? Um, there's efficient ways to do documentation. It's a pain in the butt, but a lot of the issues we run into on pen testing and in IR is configuration issues and patching issues,
Mhm.
and it was because stuff wasn't documented. And it's, everybody's like, well, this amazing attack. It's like, and it's a sophisticated attack. It's like, it is 99% someone that put the wrong configuration in, or it's an outdated version of Adobe sitting on that system, right? That's how it always is, and it's documentation would have solved that. How can we document more efficiently and effectively?
Okay, so I lied. I'm going to ask one more question.
Yeah.
Um, what is my responsibility in this? Very interesting question, right? And then we talk about like layers of, as you move up the organization, you have more responsibility to the organization, and ultimately, so you get to the top of the organization, a board, or depending on how it's organized. Now we start talking about you have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization and to the shareholders, investors, debt, creditors, etc. At what point? So like you can. I've heard arguments of like, oh, my fiduciary responsibility was to evaluate the risk and then decide whether or not the cost to mitigate that risk was worth it or appropriate for the organization. You could, and like, oh, we think we have $1 million overhang and it would cost us $10 million to plug. Like we can transfer that to insurance, we can do whatever, but we've evaluated that risk. That's a really big outlier, in terms of like that discrepancy. A lot of times it's like, oh, we have an existential, $20 million risk that we can solve with, $100,000 or $200,000. But at what point do we see the shift where boards and the fiduciaries inside these companies become personally liable for decisions that they're making related to how they're associating and mitigating risks?
I think you're already seeing it in some ways. So again, when high tech came out, I think it's 2010 for HIPAA, it gave teeth, and so we're having problems with doctors. I'm too busy to do this, and they can go to jail now depending on it. We're starting to see a lot of lawsuits against the board. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot with CISOs,
Yeah.
which when you start to look at it, I can understand it if it was a healthy, functioning board and the CISO was rogue, but in a lot of cases, it is the CISO has their hands tied, and so they become the scapegoat. I think as this gets litigated more and more, unfortunately, that's what it takes for the legal professionals to understand it and to start to see patterns, to ask questions, and they're good at it, but they have to understand it. One of my attorneys I work for is the former U.S. Attorney General for Missouri. Like, he is now at Bill Barr's firm, right? And he'll go, I don't know technology, but I can see patterns. And, I think that's where we're going to see it. Now, the problem we're still running into is the CISO could still be reporting to the CTO. It could still be reporting to the CFO. They may not have any powers there, so they're actually not CISOs themselves. So I think where you may start to see some more proactive stuff on the security is maybe shareholders starting to sue companies that they do not have a properly functioning security program, and things like that may start to happen after big breaches. But yeah, that's a tough one. I don't have a clear, concise answer on that one. The one thing I will say though, we're talking about the board, but I have that discussion with the IT people a lot. And the discussion goes along the lines of, let them make the decision, not you. Well, they don't understand it. Well, then educate them. That's your job. That's what we are supposed to do, is educate them. There's a lot more these days. I see a lot more pushback in the custodian, the IT side, than I do on the board side. I think because a lot of board and a lot of CEOs understand the risk. They may be hiding their head, but ITers just, a lot of them are burned out and just jaded about it. And I get it. I was there too.
Yeah. It's hard not to get there.
Yeah.
Dave, thank you very much. It's fantastic.
Really, it was awesome, Max.
I could do this every week, and
same here. This is my favorite part of the job. So thanks for having me on, and anything I can ever do to help or be on, I'm more than happy to be there.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks.
That's it for this episode of Signed. If you got something out of this, share it with someone in your world who's staring down a tech decision. A CIO, a CFO, a founder, a procurement lead, whoever. That's how the show grows. Everything from today lives at itbroker.com/podcast. Show notes, transcript, links to anything we mentioned. If you're in the middle of a real tech decision right now and you want someone in your corner without the vendor bias, that's what we do at itbroker.com. Schedule a call on our website. Buy tech without regret. I'm Max Clark. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.